Try something smart to chew on. The Lunchroom on RCI, Monday to Friday, 12:45 to 2 p.m. The Lunchroom, informative, enlightening, provocative, engaging. The Lunchroom on RCI, food for thought. The station that gives you, more lunch.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. It is Monday, November the 13th, 2023, and this is program number 1093. I'm your host, Calix George Jr. Now, in addition to 101.1 FM radio, you can get us at our website, rcistlucia.com, and we are also streaming on our YouTube feed. Just search for Radio Caribbean International on YouTube, and of course, be sure to subscribe to that page. Now, if you want to tell us what's on your plate today, the number to call in is 452-3046. Again, 452-3046. That's our mainline number. And you can also message in to our WhatsApp number. That is 724-0008. Of course, you can also call in on that WhatsApp number as well. And again, it is 724-0008. Now, some birthday greetings for today going out to the Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, based right here in St. Lucia, Dr. Didicus Jules. Happy birthday to you, sir, and wishing you an absolutely fantastic birthday celebration. Also sending birthday greetings out to Mr. Shadrach Joseph. Happy birthday to you, Shadrach, and we do hope that you're having a very wonderful and celebratory birthday. And also sending some birthday greetings to Miss Andrika Hippolyte. Happy birthday to you, and wishing you a wonderful, wonderful day. Now, a bit of history for today. In the year 1789, in a letter written to Jean-Baptiste Leroy, Benjamin Franklin wrote, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." In the year 1856, on this day, the great bell of Big Ben first chimed at the foot of the still unfinished clock tower outside the Palace of Westminster, of course in London, in the United Kingdom. 1933 on this day saw the first modern sit-down strike, and that happened in Austin, Minnesota by Hormel Meatpackers. In 1956 on this day, the United States Supreme Court ruled that race separation on buses in Alabama was unconstitutional. 1980 on this day saw the U.S. spacecraft Voyager 1 sending back first close-up pictures of Saturn during its flyby. And in 1985 on this day, Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted in Colombia, killing 25,000 people in the town of Armero. And we now move on to our dish of the day. The Daily Dish is brought to you the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One test for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need test for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big test with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. If all kind of tests, come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to mind nobody. They get the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses, Grossy Lanes, and Slack Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to the Lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. Of course, we do hope that everybody had a blessed and enjoyable weekend. And during the weekend, both political parties had different events on. I think in the case of the opposition, United Workers' Party, they had another in their series of town hall meetings, this time I believe somewhere in the Castries Southeast constituency. Of course, that constituency had been held by the opposition United Workers' Party for a number of years, since 2006, in fact, by the individual who is now the deputy political leader of the United Workers' Party, I believe. That is Mr. Guy Joseph. And certainly he held that right up until the last general election, when, although he may seem to have been the favorite going in, being the incumbent, he lost that seat to the Honorable Joachim Henry. And of course, we saw lots of controversy coming out of that seat over that period of time. Issues of religion coming into the mix, and all sorts of other exchanges. Appeared that it was in fact a very bitter and divisive campaign being fought across that constituency. In fact, it also is the second most populous constituency on island, and quite often we think of oversized constituencies. We would, of course, think about Grosley with a significantly large population in comparison to what is the average size of a constituency here in St. Lucia, somewhere around 9,000 or so inhabitants. In the case of Grosley, that in fact is at least somewhere around 3 times the average at this point. But also, with respect to Castries Southeast, it also is fairly large. I think well over 17,000, almost twice the average as well in that constituency. And of course, we did see a legal challenge being brought by then sitting Member of Parliament, Mr. Guy Joseph, against the recommendations of the elections. So the Boundaries Commission, which had in fact made recommendations to the Parliament of St. Lucia, that in fact had been adopted. And part of those changes saw the dividing of Grosley, currently one constituency, dividing that constituency into 3. But in addition to that, there were also realignments across the other seats in the Castries Basin, the incorporating of a new seat, which also had kind of existed in the past under that nomenclature, that of Castries Northeast. So the reintroduction of a Castries Northeast, taking in parts of Babonneau as well as Castries North and Castries East into a new seat in that northern Castries region. But as well, the dividing of the seats in that southern Castries region and the creation of what was then termed a Castries Southwest seat, which would have incorporated parts of Castries Southeast, in particular the regions of Odsa and Lac-Wamingo and Bardini, as well as Bel Air and Fort-Manger in the Roseau Valley area, as well as parts of Castries South, including parts like Marigot and Basse-Joseph. And that, in fact, was challenged by the Member of Parliament at that time, as I said. And I don't think we've ever actually gotten a result coming out of the courts on this matter. Of course, we went through a situation where Mr. Joseph's party won the election after that, the 2016 general election, and they, in fact, did not push forward the matter of any changes to the boundaries. And so even though one could argue that back in 2014 or so, when the Boundaries Commission, in fact, made their original recommendations, that was already something that was perhaps overdue. The situation continued for another 5 years and went way beyond that as well. In fact, the boundaries are supposed to be revised at least once every 7 years as per our constitution. And again, the thinking of that is that constituencies need to be as closely equal as possible in population. And so, of course, you're never going to get this to be exact, but you want it to be within a reasonable range, of variance. You allow for some measure of error, if you like, in this. And so there's this range within which you would want to have as much as possible seats falling within. And of course, as it is right now, that certainly does not exist. Interesting enough, when our boundaries experienced the last major shift, and by major I mean the introduction of new seats, that happened back in 1974. So you can well appreciate that major shift from 10 to 17 constituencies is nearly 50 years old, half a century. And what at that time existed demographically in St. Lucia was that about 55% of the population lived in what you could sort of consider the more rural part, or the southern part of St. Lucia. And by southern, I'm actually just dividing St. Lucia into two regions, roughly, a northern and a southern. And so from Dennery all the way around through Vieux-Fort and up to Ancillary, being that southern region, that represents 10 seats in our parliament. And in the sort of northern region, Castries-Gros-Islet, you have 7 seats, 5 in Castries and then 2 in what would be the quarters of Gros-Islet and Dauphin, roughly aligning to Gros-Islet and the constituency of Babonneau. And at the time, back then, about 55% of the population lived in the south, in that southern region, as opposed to 45% in the northern region. So it was a 45-55 split between north and south, respectively. What has actually occurred, at least up to the most recent census data that we actually have, actually suggests that it's been an exact flip. So now 55% of the population, according to 2010 census data, lived in the Castries and Gros-Islet regions, right? Those 7 seats. And in fact, 45% now lived in the southern region, represented by 10 seats. So effectively, you can see what this means is that the southern rural seats are, effectively smaller in population on average than these more urbanized northern seats that exist. And so the big question is, how do you correct this? Now, one might argue, if you want to actually maintain the current number of seats in the island, or maybe just keep them at 17 or move from 17 to 19, it would then mean that you have to reapportion seats between the south and the north to in fact get to that parity. And that, of course, is perhaps going to be very controversial to many to the political parties in the country. In particular, back in 1974, the Dennery Micoud at that time, I believe, was just effectively, I think, 1 seat, and it became 4. And so you had Dennery North and a Dennery South, a Micoud North and a Micoud South. Now, of course, there was a lot of speculation as to perhaps why that was done at the time. And of course, the premier at that time was representing that area. And it was, in fact, a very strong United Workers' Party area. And so you saw this split. But then if you actually would have to look at the population, you may actually not really justify 4 seats. You may probably have to bring it down to 3. Now, of course, that might sound like anathema for somebody living in Micoud or with the idea of saying a Miku North and a Miku South, that no longer can hold. And then, of course, it would also mean that you would have to now look at how it cascades into regions like V4 as well. One issue that we see, of course, and if you again read the Constitution, there really should be respect for the administrative boundaries when setting out the boundaries of constituencies. In many countries, there is very strong respect for that, and they, in fact, will ensure that you don't have an overlap from one parish or one district to another. Really and truly, you try to keep them as coherent and as put together as possible. But we have seen in the case of St. Lucia instances where that has not held. Very famously, in particular, the issue of Saltibus. Now, many people have this belief that Saltibus is a part of Choiseul. From a constituency perspective, it has been part of Choiseul. It's been Choiseul Saltibus for a number of years now. But in truth, Saltibus finds itself in the quarter of Labrie, as well as other parts of that ridge, including PI. They, in fact, are within the quarter of Labrie. And so would that have to be potentially looked at in terms of a realignment in the South? And that's where things, I'm sure, become very, very sensitive, because there have been these long-standing constituencies and divisions that in some people's minds should not be touched at all. And so that is where you then have to figure out, well, if you don't want to actually do any kind of adjustment in the southern seats, it therefore means that you will have to introduce new seats in the north. And so that has been the general direction in terms of consideration for constituency boundary reform or changes in the constituency boundaries, looking at those particular constituencies in the north and seeing how they, in fact, can be divided up to allow for better proportionality within the populations of those constituencies. As to when and if that is going to happen, well, we'll have to wait. We have seen, unfortunately, quite a delay in the matter of the census. The census we were supposed to have had since 2020 got delayed as a result of COVID-19. It didn't happen again because of COVID-19 in the year 2021. It got off the ground only this year, yeah. And unfortunately, although it's been happening since May, we still have not been able to actually see its completion to date. And so we may not actually see the results of the 2023 census until maybe 2024. And that would, of course, be very important in terms of looking again at how our demographics have changed around the island and seeing how our population is now spread around the island before you could actually look at significant changes again. That's our dish of the day. When we come back, we will be taking in your calls.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One test for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need test for your balcony. Come down to Test Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Test Plus, Test Plus, Test Plus. Big test with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. If all kind of test, come down to Test Plus. We also got gas and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best as an island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses, Grozile, and Flag Street in Dufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Test Plus.
And welcome back to our program here at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. And of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 4523046, 4523046. Now, also happening over on the weekend was the ruling St. Lucia Labour Party's annual conference of delegates. Its open session occurred, and that was happening down at the Foresaw Primary School in the constituency of Babonneau, and it saw speeches being delivered, the feature address being given by the Prime Minister of Grenada, the Honorable Dickon Mitchell, as well as St. Lucia's Prime Minister and political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre. Now, the matter of taxes is always an interesting one, and we heard today a bit of history on that very famous line by Benjamin Franklin, a gentleman who was the very famous author of American thinking and democratic principles in the 1780s and 90s, certainly influencing a lot of the thinking then, making the point that there are only two things that are certain in life. One is death, and the other taxes. And of course, we've seen taxation being an issue that has caused rifts. We've seen taxation being an issue that has caused governments to collapse. We've seen taxation causing revolutions around the world. In fact, coming back to the United States of America, the clarion call about that time was no taxation without representation. And speaking to the fact that the colonies at the time, those 13 colonies of the United Kingdom in the Americas, in North America in particular, they were opposed to the idea of this taxation that was going on by the UK upon its colonies, and they felt aggrieved, and they felt that it was in fact not benefiting their interests. Of course, you'd recall that the United Kingdom was still very much intent on fighting wars with its other European counterparts, and it was in fact funding a lot of those wars by the extraction of wealth from its colonies across the Atlantic. And so, of course, that led to significant problems there, and the birth of a new state, a democratic state of the United States of America. Well, taxation has caused lots of concerns in the past, and we can think of how countries have tried, especially right here in St. Lucia, various political parties have tried to stay away from any issues of taxing more, but of course, or taxing or renaming taxes or changing taxes, as the case may be. And in part, some people argued that the collapse, or not really the collapse, sorry, but the voting out of the Kenny Anthony administration in 2016 may have very well been in part with the introduction of the value-added tax by the St. Lucia Labour Party government back during that period of time in 2012. Now, albeit this was a tax that, of course, had been mentioned and had been established as the go-to practice across the world, and certainly had been adopted by most Caribbean countries, and in very many instances even being forced to adopt the value-added tax because of the economic issues that they had gotten into over the years. And it was perhaps an inevitability. Of course, we saw it mentioned by the John Compton administration in his first budget in 2000, first and last budget in 2007, where again that recommendation of the introduction of the value-added tax, which was something that had been proposed as far back as 2002, should in fact come to being. And that tax was set at a general rate of 15%. Now, St. Lucia, even when it introduced the value-added tax, in fact had one of the largest baskets of zero-rated items, in particular looking at the matter of food items, as well as the matter of medicines. And so the attempts, of course, at trying to cushion taxation has been the struggle of governments over the years. But and as well, we should also mention the not having taxes on water and electricity has been something that is not actually the norm in many countries around the world. In fact, even in other Caribbean states, you do in fact pay taxes on those. So we now come, of course, to the matter of the health and security levy, which was apparently part of the approach that had been looked at to finance the whole rollout of what has been a long-standing promise by many governments over the years, the issue of better health care. And it has been termed differently depending on the government in power. The St. Lucia Labour Party looking at the issue of universal health care, and the United Workers' Party crafting it as national health insurance. Now, perhaps these are somewhat different in how you might want to conceive them. Universal health care is generally a broader principle in terms of saying that every individual has the right to a certain basket of health products and services for their lives, from the point of birth or pre-birth even, right up to the point of death. And universal healthcare systems exist in many, many parts of the world. Albeit, at this point in time, many of these healthcare systems are facing tremendous challenges in being able to keep up with the rising cost of healthcare. And quite a bit of that has to do with the rising cost of health professionals and the human resource requirements that have to go along with the rollout of better healthcare. And there's that aspect of it. But of course, there's the major aspect of how do you finance healthcare? And this is where you have different modes. In the case of the United Kingdom, for instance, it is paid through general taxation. There are no fees really as you go to look to a hospital or a clinic, or it's and the same as with the case of France and many European countries. It is in fact funded through taxation. In other countries, healthcare may be funded through a sort of a contributory system of health insurance. And a number of countries that have come out later on have adopted this approach of having a health insurance as well as some small payment at the point of actual use of the service, depending on the type of service. But it still means, however, that invariably people will not be tremendously out of pocket, and the thresholds are not very high for people to be able to access health care. So the approach as to how it is dealt with is one matter. But at the end of it all, there is in fact a tremendous cost that has to be borne, whether through taxation or through health insurance, by individuals, by citizens, to ensure that healthcare can be improved and afforded. And that is really where there is going to be a major issue. Now, there have been many studies that have been done by Universal Healthcare. There's been Universal Healthcare committees that have looked at costing, seeing what are the critical items that we need to include for everybody, so everybody can have access, whether it's pediatric care, maternity care, care for individuals dealing with certain NCDs like diabetes and hypertension, issues that are pretty dire in our population, and what should be funded, what can be covered, whether it's dental and other ophthalmologic requirements. A lot of these things, of course, have to be looked at, costed, and then determined as to how it is going to be best provided, whether through the existing public healthcare facilities as well as augmenting it through private providers as well. Now, as we would well appreciate right now in St. Lucia, quite a bit of care is actually, especially at the general practitioner level, is in fact provided through private means. And as well, a lot of laboratory services are provided privately, and even some inpatient care to some degree. And many people are actually looking at private care as well. And so how you look at it, how you cost it all together, and determine what is that gap that is required is where we have a major ways to go. And in fact, one of the studies that had been done suggested that we had a gap in the region of $100 million. So in other words, beyond what we were already spending on healthcare, we needed another $100 million per annum to be able to actually afford a decent system of healthcare in St. Lucia. Now, the current administration has indicated that it's taking a gradual approach towards introduction of universal healthcare, and of course that has to be funded. And this is where the approach of introducing this health and security levy is coming in. And the estimate is that it is to support somewhere in the region of $33 million EC into the coffers of government towards health and security investments. Now, it's clearly not enough. It's clearly not even half of what was projected to be required. And so it therefore means that we're not going to wake up to overnight to a perfect healthcare system, or a healthcare system that might be comparable to what exists in Martinique or in other countries. So still then the issue of managing a better healthcare is to say, hey, where can we make the biggest improvements in health outcomes? All right, where can we spend the money best to be able to ensure our best outcomes there? And so that is really part of the challenge, of course, at this point, to really triage universal healthcare, if you like, and see how you can prioritize the types of improvements that are required. But we can speak about that in a bit. We actually do have to take in our weather report brought to you through the St. Lucia Met Service.
Make your home merry and bright with Island Style's massive Christmas sale. Our wide range of porcelain and ceramic tiles are on sale up to 50% off. And that's not all. Save up to 15% off. Bathrooms with bundle and save. The more you buy, the more you save. On gorgeous bathroom vanities, bathtubs, faucets, shower glass, toilets, and more. Plus, contractors and tilers are in for a treat with our special discounts on tiling tools and accessories. Sale on now at all locations: Castries, Rodney Bay, and Viewfort. Or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. It's time to deck the halls, deck the walls, or even deck the deck with huge Christmas savings only at Island Style.
Our apologies for that. We don't seem to have that weather report available. So hopefully we can get that to you later on in the day. And of course, as I mentioned, we are discussing a few matters regarding that of taxation and pretty much the necessity of it. And that, of course, that famous line coming from Benjamin Franklin: nothing pretty much is certain. Well, there's two things that are certain in life are the matter of death and taxes. Now, of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 452-3046, 452-3046, as well as our WhatsApp number, it is 724-0008. Let's go to the phone lines at this time. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. Very good, thank you. How are you doing? Mm. I would consider it a modern hospital. I think it was designed along modern lines. I think they have made some significant strides in terms of equipping it, and they're also looking tremendously at the human resource requirements and the systems that have to be put in place. So I think it is a modern hospital. But that said, there are even different grades of hospitals. I mean, there are specialist hospitals and there are hospitals that. But in terms of a general hospital, I think it's not a bad facility at all. But you know why we don't have it though, eh? Okay. No, it was it because it was designed. It was designed for it, eh? There you go. There you go. But why would you bet that though? Why would you bet that? Even though, because there's no, look at it this way. For in the case of, no, well, the equipment was there, caller. You see, and that's the thing. But and this is the major problem that we have, that it's getting to the point of completing this capital infrastructure is one thing. As soon as you do the maintenance now, that's where there's issues. That's where we're falling short. And well, I'm glad that you prefaced what you said in the beginning about depoliticization of issues like healthcare, because we've seen the results of doing that, and unfortunately, the kind of progress that we should have been made already, we don't have it. So so your recommendation is that we should go towards a direct contribution similar to what you have with NIC, as a salary deduction. Okay. And you're saying as an option, or not, or should it be mandatory? Well, I mean, at the end of it all, from what I recall, even when you were looking at the various UHE financing options, that the NIC type contribution was always part of the proposal, but you would still also have to look for some other form of because you would have, like, say, sin taxes, for instance. Can you increase taxes on things like sugar and tobacco and alcohol, these things that are known to impact on negative health outcomes. And that would raise some, but you would still have to have some direct taxation as well to be able to supplement it. Mm-hmm. I suspect the other issue too, caller, and it comes back to the nature of our how we account for taxation, is that I think people need to be seeing more direct one-to-one relationships when it comes to payments or certain things. I mean, we've seen it in the past. We were told we had was it a road tax or a gas tax? And we were told that the gas tax was in a lockbox, and then there was never a lockbox. So the money just went in the consolidated fund. We never really were told, well, this is the amount that was coming out of that particular amount of tax, and this is what we're putting it towards, or towards a fund. And I think... Well, in the case of the gas, it never existed. It was just it was almost like a branding or a marketing ploy, but in fact, it never existed. But I'm saying that I think quite often taxpayers want to know that, okay, if I'm paying a particular tax with a head, which is called, let's say, environmental tax. That's something we had in the past, or a health tax, or road tax. I should know that that tax is going towards the thing that we say it is going for. Yeah, because... Yeah. Mm. Yeah. 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 Yeah, definitely, caller. Thanks very much for that contribution. Have a good one. And, of course, the number to call in to tell us what's on your plate today, it is 4523046. Again, 4523046. As well as our WhatsApp number, it is 7240008. We've been discussing the matter of taxation. Can there be more transparency when it comes to the issue of how tax dollars can be spent? And, of course, we're taking this on the heels of the government, in fact, just recently announcing that preparations are already ongoing for the upcoming financial year starting April 1, 2024. And, of course, that 2024-2025 budget is already being looked at as we have already crossed that halfway mark for this financial year. And the planning for the next one is beginning. The matter of showing how tax dollars, where they are coming from, and how they are being divided up, how they are being apportioned, I think is certainly something that is very important, particularly when we have taxes that are being raised in the name of some particular use. It would be very much useful to be able to see so. In fact, the reality is that the government spends hundreds of millions of dollars on health. So really, even having a health and security tax, and of course the government also spends hundreds of millions of dollars on security as well. The police force alone, I think, probably has a budget close to $100 million. And of course that doesn't cover the correctional services as well, and the fire service, and the many others that fall under that ministry. And so the idea of having this tax is really more of a bit of a top-up to be able to deal with the kind of investments and supports that have to be needed. And raising that issue, as the last caller did, about the matter of diagnostic services at our medical facilities, that is vital. in being able to treat what people are coming up with at this point in time. And we can well see the travesty that has happened with the case of some of these projects. The Owen King EU Hospital, as we know, was a gift from the EU Commission, the European Union, and the largest grant that had ever been provided by that entity, by Europe, to an Eastern Caribbean country. And part of that included equipment. And it was very unfortunate that the hospital could not have been commissioned, and a lot of the equipment simply was not being maintained. And that meant that, and in fact, we also heard that the cost of maintaining the diagnostic equipment is tremendous. I think one figure I heard was that the government would have, just to maintain this equipment, they would have had to budget it somewhere around $7 million per year to ensure the proper functioning of the diagnostic unit, the department at OKEU. So you can see how expensive some of this the equipment is, but one thing is to have it, it's a whole other thing to maintain it. And the reality is, you also have to, over time, sometimes also procure new equipment. So if we want to quote unquote be modern, right? It's like people who, you have your iPhone, and every year there's a new model coming out. It's pretty much the same thing with medical equipment as well. And so over a period of time, there is a lifespan for the equipment that has to be modernized as well and changed. So it does come at a cost, and the approaches that have been suggested over the past would also mean that we also have to have strong relationships with our regional counterparts, and working with our friends over in Martinique is also a really important aspect in this mix. And being able to afford this kind of equipment might also mean that you also have to take the approach of health tourism in the mix as well. And some countries have been able to leverage health tourism. So they've made significant strides, significant investments in their healthcare systems, whether it's through infrastructure, equipment, personnel, systems, to ensure that they have a good high quality system, but they also are augmenting the revenue to support that through individuals actually coming in from outside to make use of that medical system as well. And we do find ourselves in an area that can potentially lend to that model. We are 3 hours, 4 hours away from the country that spends the most on healthcare in the world, that of the United States of America, which I believe is somewhere around nearly 11% of their economy is spent on healthcare. By far the highest rate of any developed country. And so the idea of health tourism could potentially attract Americans as well, looking for more affordable healthcare. But the reality is as well, we've seen a number of other countries speed ahead in terms of being able to do so, like Colombia, for instance. Costa Rica is also another very good country to look at. They've got a universal healthcare system that has been identified as one of, with a lot of good best practices and possibilities for looking at and modeling as we move forward. But certainly the need to ensure that people see the connection and see the improvements for their dollar is certainly very important as well. And even as we are speaking about this matter of healthcare and investment in healthcare, the best investment perhaps that we can also be making is that of preventative health. And how can we, in fact, support better living living that ensures that we have fewer people obese, we have healthier populations, that people are eating right, they are exercising right, they are engaging in healthy lifestyles. And so that is very important in terms of supporting that challenge. And that's where certainly the matter of other agencies and inter-agency collaboration becomes really important, whether it's the Ministry of Sport, whether it's the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, in tackling these other aspects, which in fact are very important in healthcare as well, healthcare delivery. So that's our program for today. We do hope that you can, of course, join us tomorrow for another program here of the Lunchroom at Radio Caribbean International. I'm your host, Calix George Jr., saying goodbye.